The morning sun spilled golden light through the wide garage door, dust particles floating lazily in the warm air. The rhythmic clink of a wrench against metal echoed in the spacious workshop, mingling with the faint scent of oil and rubber. Jake Miller, a man in his mid-30s with rolled-up sleeves and grease-streaked hands, was hunched over the open hood of an old pickup. His brow was furrowed in concentration, each movement deliberate, each sound a testament to years of experience fixing engines that others had long given up on. It was just another ordinary day for Jake, until he heard it. A faint squeaking sound, irregular and hesitant, growing louder with each turn of the wheel. It wasn't the sound of a car or a machine, it was softer, almost fragile. Jake turned his head toward the entrance. There, framed by the morning light, was a small figure pushing a wheelchair forward with effort. The boy looked no older than 7, his blonde hair catching the sunlight like threads of gold. His clothes were simple, slightly worn jeans, a red t-shirt, but it was his eyes that held Jake's attention. Wide, curious, and just a little tired, as though they'd seen far more than a child ever should. Behind him stood a woman, perhaps in her late 20s, with brown hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. Her face carried the kind of weary beauty that comes from long days and sleepless nights. Her hands were clasped together tightly at her chest, not out of cold, but out of nervousness. She took a small step forward, her voice wavering as she spoke. "Sir, I'm sorry to bother you," she began, glancing quickly at her son. "His wheelchair, it's been stuck for days. I've tried everything I could, but the wheel won't turn right, and I can't afford to replace it right now." Her voice cracked on the last words, betraying the quiet desperation she had tried to mask. Jake straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. He took a few steps toward them, his boots clicking against the concrete floor. "Bring him here," he said simply, his tone warm but firm. The woman hesitated. "Don't worry about payment," Jake interrupted with a faint smile. "Everyone deserves to move freely. Now let's see what we're working with." The boy's small fingers gripped the armrests of his chair as Jake knelt down beside him. Up close, Jake could see the scuffed footrests, the worn-out fabric of the seat, and the right wheel that wobbled at the slightest touch. He gently placed a hand on the wheel and spun it, feeling the resistance. "Looks like the bearings are rusted," Jake murmured. "And this spoke is bent. Nothing we can't fix." The boy's lips curved into a shy smile. "You can fix it?" he asked, his voice soft but hopeful. Jake grinned. "Kid, I've fixed tractors that were older than me. This chair's no match for me." He wheeled the boy over to his workbench and began gathering tools. The mother stood nearby, watching in silence, her eyes glistening as she saw the way Jake worked, patiently, carefully, as if the chair were the most important thing he'd ever repaired. He loosened bolts, removed the damaged wheel, and set about cleaning the rusted parts. Occasionally, he glanced up at the boy, who watched every movement as if memorizing each step. "You like fixing things?" Jake asked, his hands busy polishing the bearings. The boy nodded. "I used to fix my toy cars, before they broke too much." Jake chuckled. "Well, maybe one day you can help me in here. But for now, let's get you rolling again." Minutes turned into nearly an hour. The clink of tools, the hiss of a lubricant spray, and the low hum of Jake's voice explaining each step filled the garage. When he finally reattached the wheel and tightened the last bolt, he gave the chair a gentle push. Across the floor, it rolled smoothly, no squeaks, no resistance, just quiet, effortless movement. "There we go," Jake said, patting the armrest. "Good as new." The boy's grin was instantaneous, bright enough to light the dimmest corner of the workshop. He spun the chair in a small circle, then rolled forward, laughing with pure, unrestrained joy. The sound filled the garage, cutting through the smell of oil and dust like a fresh breeze. The mother's hand covered her mouth, her shoulders trembling as tears finally escaped. She stepped forward, her voice breaking. I don't know how to thank you." Jake simply shrugged. "You already did, look at that smile." The boy wheeled himself toward his mother, still laughing, while Jake turned back to his workbench. He didn't notice the way the mother looked at him, like someone seeing a stranger perform a small miracle. What Jake also didn't notice was that in that moment, a thread had been woven between their lives. A quiet act of kindness, given freely, would soon set in motion events he could never have imagined. The days after fixing the wheelchair slipped by quietly, like most days did in Jake Miller's life. The hum of engines, the smell of oil, and the clang of tools against metal filled his waking hours. He had no idea that the moment in the garage with the little boy and his mother would be anything more than a small good deed, a simple choice to help without expecting anything in return. But business at the garage was slow. Too slow. The occasional customer came in with a flat tire or an engine tune-up, but those jobs barely kept the lights on. Jake often found himself staying late at night, sitting in the office with an old coffee mug in hand, staring at bills stacked like tiny mountains on his desk. The garage was his pride, something he'd inherited from his father, and he was determined to keep it alive. Still, there were nights when he wondered how much longer he could hold on. It was on one such afternoon, a few days after he'd helped the boy, that a sharp, clean honk broke the monotony of the day. Jake looked up from under the hood of a sedan to see a sleek black car pulling up outside. It was polished to a mirror finish, the kind of vehicle that didn't belong in his dusty part of town. The driver's door opened, and a tall man in a tailored suit stepped out. His presence was commanding, but not in an intimidating way, more like someone used to being listened to. He approached the open garage door with deliberate steps, his polished shoes clicking against the concrete. "You Jake Miller?" the man asked, his voice calm but direct. Jake straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. "Yeah, that's me. Can I help you?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into the inside pocket of his suit and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This is for you," he said, holding it out. Jake frowned, his fingers hesitating before taking it. "From who?" The man's lips curved into a faint smile. "From someone you helped recently. That's all I'm allowed to say for now. But I was told to make sure you read it today." With that, the man gave a polite nod, turned, and walked back to his car. Moments later, the sleek vehicle was gone, leaving only the faint echo of its engine in the quiet street. Jake stood there for a long moment, the envelope feeling heavier than it should in his hands. Finally, he tore it open. Inside was a small photograph of the boy he had helped, grinning wide in his now smoothly rolling wheelchair. The sunlight in the photo made his blonde hair almost glow, and in his lap was a small model airplane, its silver wings catching the light. Behind the photo was a handwritten letter. The handwriting was neat, almost elegant. "Mr. Miller, you didn't just fix a wheelchair. You gave my son his freedom back. You gave him the chance to feel like a kid again, without the weight of broken wheels slowing him down. We can never repay you for what you've done, but we'd like to try. Please come to the town airfield tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We have something we'd like to discuss with you." There was no signature, just a final line. Sometimes, the smallest acts change the biggest things. Jake read the letter twice, then a third time. His brows drew together in confusion. The airfield, why there, and what could they possibly want to discuss? For a brief moment, a flicker of suspicion crossed his mind. It wasn't every day that strangers invited you to meet them somewhere after delivering cryptic letters. But then he thought of the boy's smile, the way it had lit up the entire garage, and something inside him told him this wasn't something to ignore. That night, Jake sat at his kitchen table, the letter and photo lying in front of him. He kept glancing at them between sips of coffee, his mind buzzing with questions. Who exactly were they? Why the secrecy? And what could possibly happen at the airfield? By the time he turned in for the night, he still didn't have any answers. But he knew one thing for sure. He was going to be there in the morning. Little did Jake know, the next day at the airfield would not just bring answers, it would change the course of his life in ways he never imagined. The next morning, Jake drove to the small town airstrip. The sun was barely up, painting the horizon gold. To his shock, a sleek private jet was parked there. The boy and his mother stood near the stairs, waving excitedly. The mother hugged him. "Jake, my father owns one of the largest aviation companies in the country. You didn't know who we were, and you didn't care, you just helped." "That's rare." The boy beamed. "Grandpa says you're going to fix his planes now." Jake blinked in disbelief as the man from the car approached, offering a handshake and a job contract, salary far beyond anything Jake had imagined. As the jet engines roared, Jake realized something profound. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can open skies you never knew existed. As Jake stood on the runway, the private jet's engines humming softly, he still couldn't fully grasp how a simple act in his dusty garage had led him here. The boy he had once seen struggling to push a squeaky, broken wheelchair now rolled with ease, his laughter carried away by the wind. His mother's eyes shone with gratitude, but now there was also pride in introducing Jake to her father, the man who owned one of the largest aviation companies in the country. The job offer was more than just work, it was a chance at stability, at building something greater than himself. Yet for Jake, the real reward had already been given, the knowledge that kindness, given without expectation, has a way of circling back when you least expect it. He shook the grandfather's hand, sealing not just a deal, but a friendship. As the boy waved from the base of the jet stairs, Jake realized something he'd carry for the rest of his life. Sometimes, the smallest repair can fix far more than what's broken. It can mend hope, faith, and the invisible threads that tie strangers together. And in that moment, under the open sky, Jake knew this was only the beginning of a brand new chapter.